Hey, what's up guys? Kevin here from Canadian Card Pickers, and today I want to do a video that provides new collectors, hopefully that's you that's watching this, or maybe you've been doing it for a little bit, but you still have some questions. I wanted to do a video that explains some of the basics of baseball card collecting, but this does apply to a lot of other sports cards. So if you kind of dabble in other things like hockey or baseball, basketball, football, that kind of thing, some of this will apply, and some of this will apply to not just sports cards. But I'm going to look at it through the lens of baseball cards because that's what I do and is kind of my primary thing. So the first thing I just want to go over is some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the different kind of card brands, rookie cards, card types, print runs and serialization, errors, grading, storage and protection, risks, and a couple other things. But that's what we're going to cover in this video. So hopefully at least one of these things will teach you something. So let's jump in. First, let's talk about brands. This isn't an exhaustive list of brands, but these are kind of the main cards that you're going to see on the market, at least in the modern era. I'm not going to talk really about a lot of the older brands, from the more vintage era. You'll have to do a lot more research specific to the era that you're looking into. But at least this will cover stuff if you're entering and buying new stuff now. So first up, we have Topps. So Topps has their main series of things, which is under the Topps brand, but they also have two kind of sub companies, which is Bowman, and then you have Allen and Ginter. So Topps is going to be their main stuff. Those are going to be kind of the primary base cards that you're going to see. They're kind of the reference for baseball cards. So they're a primary manufacturer. They are the only company that has an official license with Major League Baseball. So that means that they can not only use the players, but they can use team names and information from there. Whereas others only have a deal with, for instance, the Players Association, but not with the MLB. So they don't have the rights to any of the team names and things like that. Not only that, they have a variety of different products, whether or not you're a fan of Chrome, you like real ritzy stuff like Inception or Gold Label, things like that. They have a whole bunch of different types of sets. I myself am a big fan of just the base series, but I've started to dip my toes into some other things. If you've seen my other videos, you'll have noted that. I'm a big fan of Inception, but I personally prefer getting the individual cards as opposed to buying a box and hoping I get them. But there's a whole bunch, and not only that, Topps is starting to dip their toes into NFTs. They are one of the top collections on wax right now. That's a whole different topic. I don't know if you guys are interested in learning about that, but feel free to comment if you'd like to see videos about NFTs. But for now, we're going to talk about the physical cards. So first up, going to go back. First up, after Topps, is the Bowman brand. With Bowman, they primarily deal with a lot of the minor league stuff and prospects. So if you're getting the Bowman draft, you're going to see a lot of people in AA, AAA, that kind of thing. Some people really like that because these are the first cards of a player's professional career. So for instance, I recently grabbed myself an Alek Manoah and what was it? It was Bowman draft card. It wasn't Chrome or anything, but it was the first card that's ever been made of him under Bowman and Topps and that. So, if he really does great down the line in his career, that card could be worth a little bit of something. And next up, there is Allen and Ginter. Allen and Ginter is a little different. Topps and Bowman, very kind of traditional, really focused on the players, the ball game, that kind of thing. Topps Heritage, has a few minor gimmicks, but really is focused on the game. Allen and Ginter has a lot of cards that are completely unrelated to baseball. So you might get a relic that is a TV host. That happened for myself. Or you might get cards of buildings or actors or celebrities or things like that. So if you really want to focus on the baseball aspect of card collecting, then I would suggest sticking with, Topps or Bowman if you're looking at kind of the Topps and their subsidiary products. Allen and Ginter is definitely niche. Ultimately, it's up to you. I recommend going and looking at what kind of products they have or what kind of cards they have in their set. I don't want to dissuade you. They've got some interesting stuff in there, but I tend to lean more towards the primary Topps products like Bowman and Topps. Next up, you have Panini and Donruss. Donruss was a lot more popular back in the mid 1900s and that kind of thing, and then eventually they weren't doing as well, so Panini ended up buying them out. Unfortunately, Panini does not have a license with MLB. Like I mentioned, Topps is the only one that does, but they do have it with the Players Association, which means they can have the players, but they just can't have any team assets. So you're going to see San Diego instead of San Diego Padres. You're going to see, Cleveland instead of Cleveland Indians, that kind of thing. And they do have a variety of products, but if you really want to get some core collector stuff, I'd recommend going to Topps. But Panini has some really cool stuff. For instance, their Diamond King set is one of the funnest sets I have ever opened. I opened up a hobby box, which there should be a link up above. If not, it's coming out soon, depending on when I put out this video. But it was the funnest box I've opened. And I've opened up a lot of different ones, as you can see on this channel, and it was just so fun, such cool designs, so beautiful. I would compare it to Inception, like aesthetically, and it really tickled me in a good way. So, you just have to look at the products. That's the biggest thing when you're starting collecting. You want to look at, what do I like? What makes me happy? If you're collecting just for yourself, do whatever you want, right? Whatever makes you happy, whatever cards you find coolest, go ahead. If you're collecting more for value and investment, then you might want to stray more towards the officially licensed cards from Topps. And next up, Upper Deck. They don't produce baseball cards anymore, but I wanted to mention it because they did produce quite a bit back in the day. The early 2000s, the 90s and stuff like that. So you can find cards like this. For instance, I'm trying to get a collection of Ryan Dempster cards for like a shadow box I'm doing. He's from my hometown, so I kind of want to have a cool thing for him. And someone was nice enough on baseball card subreddit to send me a bunch of their cards that they had of him, because it's not really a big part of their collection. And all of those cards, except for I think one, were Upper Deck, out of like maybe 6 or 7. So if you're looking for some older cards, don't disregard Upper Deck. You might be able to find some. There's things like Ken Griffey Jr. and that kind of thing. A lot of those 90s players are going to be available through Upper Deck, and people might not be thinking of them as much. People might be focusing on Topps, so definitely check that out. Moving on, I want to talk about card types. This is going to be a big part of this video. All the different card types that you might encounter as you're collecting, and what they kind of are and mean. So first up, the most important thing is rookie cards. Some of the most valuable cards out there are rookie cards. That is the one of the first cards printed from someone's time as a major league player. But one thing to keep in mind is, as of 2006, the MLB Players Association and the MLB have regulated what can be constituted an official rookie card. They basically, one of the issues, I believe it was Topps, I think, expected a player to debut in a given year in 2006, but unfortunately that player didn't. So his card was in there, but he'd never debuted in the majors. So after that, the regulations require that you can't put the official logo, which you can see there in the video. You can't put that on a card and can't claim it's a rookie card unless they have debuted in the majors. That is the important thing. They can't have only played in the AA and AAA. They have to have debuted in the major leagues during the regular season. I don't believe spring training counts, because that's when they're testing people out to see if they have what it takes to be in the majors. So typically what you're going to see is, for instance, if a player debuted this year in 2021, there's a small chance, depending on when in the season, that they could appear in the update release, for instance, of Topps 2021. For instance, Series 2, coming out very soon at the time of recording this on June 9th. but you know, the update will be later on in the year. Usually they include trades and new debuts, but if someone debuts way later into the season, they won't appear usually until the following year. So if they debuted 2021, you probably won't see them until Series 1 or 2, or even update of 2022. So that's something to keep in mind. If there's a player you're really hunting for, you know, keep that in mind about they won't show until after they've debuted. And the other thing too is a lot of places don't actually consider a rookie card to be a true rookie card unless it is the base card. So that is the very simplest form. It's not an insert. It's not a, you know, a parallel. It would be that base card is the true rookie card. Sometimes parallels aren't worth as much, but a lot of the time they will be. If you have that base card image and photo and it's a parallel, it just kind of adds a bit more. So next up, card variations. So this is still under card types. The first thing is parallels. There's a variety of different parallels that you might encounter. These are different versions of a base card. So in the image that I show, or the examples I show on the right, in the case of the 2020 Series 1, I believe it is, with Yordan Alvarez, the border on this particular design of card is on that right-hand side. You can see how the coloring and design vary. So the first one is gold. The second one is Independence Day, and you can see kind of the red and the white and the stars. And then black is just kind of a black texture to it. So there's multiple other parallels, not just these ones. You know, you've got things like Walmart blue. You've got, I believe it was even dollar store yellow from like Dollar Tree or something like that. You've got Mother's Day pink, Father's Day blue, a bunch of different ones. And some types of parallels and foils are exclusive to certain packs. So you might not be able to find one of these, you know, from a hanger box compared to a hobby box. So that's something to keep in mind, especially for those of you that might be trying to collect a single player. That can be really tough, but you're trying to do what they call a parallel rainbow, where you're getting all the different colors of parallels. It's just something to keep in mind that if you want to try and pull one, you got to open up a different variety of card packs. But really, if you want to try and do a rainbow, you want to go and buy singles. That's going to be your simplest thing, is check eBay out, see what kind of singles are up there, because it's going to be a lot more affordable, and you're guaranteed you might end up spending a lot more than just buying it outright. So next up, we have foils. So these are basically just a shiny parallel, but it's not just that border in some cases, it's the whole card. So for instance, a rainbow foil on the right-hand side there, hard to demonstrate this just from photos, but it's got kind of a rainbow sheen to it, and you know, almost kind of silvery in a way. And then the gold foil, which is a jumbo hobby box exclusive, it's kind of got a gloss to it, but mainly it's just that kind of border I have found when it comes to the gold. Next up, the next thing I want to mention is, yeah, there are pack exclusives. I mentioned the gold foil is a jumbo hobby box exclusive. So that's just something you need to keep in mind. If you're buying a box and you're hoping to get a certain card, you might not be able to get it from that pack. So keep that in mind when you're buying, you know, wax, which is a term for boxes, because you don't want to, you know, put yourself out because you had no chance at all to get that. Next up are inserts. So inserts are basically a subset within the main set. So they'll distinguish themselves by not looking like the base cards at all. So for instance, just to go back and show, you can see the design on this, right? It's got the image and then that kind of notched border on the right and the name. Well, these inserts look nothing like it. You've got the Decade's Best Ken Griffey Jr. card there. That is totally different. It's going to vary in the different years and what it's talking about, pitchers, hitters, teams. Then you have the Turkey Red. This is for 2020. You know, there's just a lot more stuff out there because the 2021 set hasn't fully been released, so it's easier to get images. But Turkey Red is kind of an older style, almost like a bit of a painting look to it. Very cool, very classy looking insert, and some people really like that. Got kind of more of a cardboard feel to it. And then often what they're doing is they're doing throwbacks to old styles of cards. So, for instance, the one on the right there with Sandy Koufax, it's a 1985 style card. So, back in 1985, that was what the new cards looked like. That was the style. So, there's usually a variety of different inserts. Some are worth something, some aren't. Some people specifically look for inserts, because they just like the aesthetic of it. But it ultimately depends on you. For me, most of the time, inserts aren't a big deal. But I'll keep them around if they're a variation or a rarer one. So you just got to kind of look into whether or not the card that you've pulled is a rare one. And often there is the ability to get these inserts in a chrome style too as well. Next up is relics. So we're getting into like the big hits right now. These are the things that usually are going to go for the most money, give or take. So what is a relic? Typically a relic is a form of memorabilia embedded into a card. So this could be something like jerseys, like a piece of the jersey, or patches, or bats, bases, cleats. There's some very interesting ones. There's even dirt, from stadiums that are put into little packets, and they're a thicker card. But there's a variety of different types of relics. So, for instance, on the right hand side, you can see that in the name card. So what that specifically is they have a piece of the player's jersey name in there, and that's worth a lot more. For instance, this is a 1 of 1, whereas the Ken Griffey Jr. one is just a little piece of the jersey. You don't know where it's from. It's very simple. Those ones usually don't go for as much. So the more variety there is in the relic, for instance, multiple colors is sometimes used, for every break in the color. So for instance, on the Hunter Pence one, you'd have 3, right? You got the white, the red, and then the inner red. That means it's a little more valuable. Whereas on the Ken Griffey Jr., it's just the gray, nothing special. It's not worth quite as much. And another thing to keep in mind is the designation of game used versus player worn. So game used means it was out there in an official game. If it's just player worn, the minimum for that would just be like the player put the jersey on, they confirmed, yep, they're wearing it, done. And then the person takes it off and then they go and they can cut it into pieces. Game used is always going to be a little more valuable. So that's just something to keep in mind. More often than not, I find I get game used memorabilia, but you might encounter something that's just player worn or whatever. And so you just got to keep that in mind, that there's a difference in that as far as value. People are going to lean towards game used over just player worn or player used. And then the next thing, this is probably the more lower value relic, and that's manufactured relics. These are specifically made for the pack. They have no real sentimental or special value to them. They're just made. So this includes like rookie patches, draft day medallions in general. There's nothing necessarily special about them intrinsically. They're just made for that particular set as just a cheaper kind of lower priced, lower or higher lower rarity relic. So these are some things to keep in mind when it comes to relics. They're really fun to get. If you get something like a hobby box, you're guaranteed to get relics. And then if you get like a jumbo hobby box, you'll get more. Sometimes you'll pull a relic from just the kind of like normal packs and stuff, but it's a lot more rare. So sometimes that guarantee is nice. And speaking of jumbo hobby boxes, you can get autographs guaranteed from them. So that segues us into the next section, which is about autograph cards. And there's a couple different variations of autos. First up, you can get like base cards or insert cards with autographs. So for instance, there's the 1985 style on the right-hand side there of Kyle Lewis with an autograph on it. But then you can also get the base cards. So it really depends on what you're working with. Sometimes you'll see inserts, like insert autos, before you'll see a player's base card come out. So for instance, right now, as we're anticipating the release of 2021 Series 2, you can get Ke'Bryan Hayes rookie cards in the insert style or from like Topps Heritage, but his actual true rookie card hasn't been released yet. So, there's high demand for that because it's technically chronologically his first rookie, but not his true rookie. So kind of interesting there. Next up, you have parallel autos. So sometimes you might get a autograph card, but it's on like a black parallel or something like that. Those are way more valuable than if it was just a basic one. Next up, we have cut signatures. So what's special about these is usually these are from people who are no longer alive to sign an autograph. So for instance, in the example that I showed below, you have Pee Wee Reese, who was a player with Jackie Robinson. They both were on the Brooklyn Dodgers, and they were quite close. So what they do is they take things like checks, contracts, autographs that are lying around, things like that, and they'll cut the signature from there, and they'll put that into a frame. So those are kind of more unique because they weren't signed for the purpose of the card. They have some kind of other value to it. You might not know what it is, you might not know where it's from, but often those are way more rare than just the base kind of card autographs. So those are fun, especially if you're into, you know, more of those Hall of Famers and old school players. The next thing is multi-auto cards. So that is multiple player autographs on one card. Usually something like dual auto or triple auto, quad auto. All of those are pretty hard to come by. Often when you get those dual autographs or triple or whatever, they might be in a redemption card. That's something you might encounter where instead of them putting in a pack where it could get damaged or whatever, you get a redemption card, you go online to Topps' website and you redeem it, and then in however long it takes for them to send it to you, they'll send the card and then you'll have it. So you're not opening the card from a pack, you're opening up a redemption code. So, but multi-autos are great because often they'll have like a new player and someone they're kind of comparable to. You know, it might be like a rookie and then like a Hank Aaron or something like that. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Sometimes they do that with like, you know, top prospects or top rookies, or they might do that with like a bunch of teammates or something like that. So that's something to look for. And another thing to note about autographs that can change up the value a little bit is whether or not it is a sticker autograph or if it's an on-card autograph. So in the two examples that I showed there, the Tim Anderson and the Kyle Lewis, you'll see that with Tim Anderson, you can kind of see the outline of the sticker. It's might be a little hard to see, but hopefully you can. What that means is Topps sent like a sheet of stickers to this player for them to sign each sticker, and then Topps just applies that to whatever card, which is different than Topps sitting down with the player, like on the right-hand side with Kyle Lewis, and having them sign directly on the card. So on-card autographs usually are more valuable because that means that the player handled the card itself. So there's kind of an association physically with the player. Whereas the other one, they only handled the sticker, not quite as special. So that's just something to keep in mind when you pull an auto, is if it's stickered, might not be as valuable as say something that's not stickered. So, but often you're not going to see like, you wouldn't see that Baseball Stars Tim Anderson in an on the card. That is specifically a stickered one. Whereas the Kyle Lewis, you'd probably only see that in the on card one. So just something to keep in mind when you're pulling autos. Next up, we have short prints. So short prints are basically a limited run of a photo variation. So I talked about parallels where the photo stayed the same, but the border changed a little bit. This is the opposite. The border and everything stays the same, give or take, and the image changes. So again, it's a photo variation of a base style card. They have varying rarity depending on the print run. So there's a couple different styles of short prints. You have a short print, SP, which is the lower end, which usually has more than any other type of short print for how many they printed, and a lower value. Then you have super short prints, SSP, less cards printed, usually higher value. Then it used to be SSSP, super short print, I think it was, or something, which now the terminology is ultra short print, I think as of 2021. So USP, but either of those designations are correct. And there are even less cards printed of those and much higher value. So I've put an example here of some short prints from 2020 Series 2. This is specifically with Luis Robert. This is one I'm most familiar with. I actually have the base short print, the one where he's got the sunglasses in the dugout. That card, much more expensive than the base card. His base rookie card is about $30 at the highest value on Beckett in their price guide. The short print is between $150 to $600, I think it is. So it's much more expensive. Basically, Beckett takes the lowest price it's sold for, the highest price it's sold for, and lists those as a reference. Next up, you have the super short print, which in this case is him running the bases. And then there's another super short print. This one is quite high demand. This is the Rookie Stars card. So even though everything else looks different, it is a short print of Luis Robert. If you go to the back, it will be number 392, which is his series number designation for his base card. So that one has Bo Bichette, Luis Robert, and Yordan Alvarez. Great players, super awesome. So definitely high demand for that because it's got all three of them. And then finally, you have the ultra short print, which is an homage to a older Error card, which we'll go into a little later and I'll reference it. But basically, a player, as part of the Error, they didn't actually print the name on the card. So the ultra short print, it's an homage to that, intentionally though in this case, where his name isn't on it. Looks identical to the base one, but this one goes for like $3,800, give or take, something like that. So just kind of gives you an idea of short prints. Another thing to keep in mind is there are codes when it comes to short prints. So on the back of your cards, you will notice there's a code at the bottom. So for instance, if I were, I'll pick a random card here and I'll look at the back, and, the code on this one, for instance, is, CMP 043213, right? But the last three digits of that determine whether or not it is a base card or a short print. So for Topps 2020 Series 2, for instance, that Luis Robert base card, its code at the back, those last three digits will be 099. Then the next step, when you go to short print like Luis Robert in the dugout, that code is going to be 115. Then for super short prints, it's going to be 116. And then for ultra short prints or super short prints, I think is what it's meant to be, is 117. So if you're ever uncertain, you can look at the back and check that out. But that is specific to each series. So, Topps 2021 Series 1 would not have those same codes. So often what you can do is you can go to Beckett.com and you can hunt for their variations guides or that kind of thing. And they do it for each series and for each year and everything. And they give you an idea of what you can look for, who has short prints, Luis Robert, or who has, the most. For instance, Luis Robert has a whole bunch, but, Steven Strasburg has 2. So you can have a look and see what you might want to look for, especially if you have a favorite player, you can see if they're included. So yeah, short prints are super fun. They're an exciting hit to get. Often when you're pulling cards, when you get something special, at least nowadays, the card will be flipped. And what I mean by that is when you're going through, if the face of the card is facing you, then when you hit a short print or something like that, you'll see the back of the card as you're going through the cards, and the face will be away from you. So that's just something to keep in mind, that when you do that, it might be a parallel, it might be a special hit, it could be any number of things. So don't disregard something that is facing away from you when you pull it. So next up, which this kind of ties into serialized or into short prints and that kind of thing, is print runs and serialization. So with each card they print, they might have a limited number of cards. So with a short print, they're going to say, we're only going to print, 20 of these, right? Whether or not it's a parallel or something like that. And there's kind of two ways that it's done. Sometimes stuff is just limited just by design, and there's no indication that it's limited. So short prints often are like that. There's not a lot of them, but, there'd be less than, the base cards. More often than not, though, if there's a intentionally limited print run, it's associated with a serialized card, and I'll get into what I mean by that on the next slide. But usually, yeah, they're associated with rarer cards like autos, parallels, etc. And they're higher value when there's a limited number of prints due to scarcity. The less of something there is, the more demand there is, and therefore the price goes higher, right? Economics 101. But moving on to serialization, which often ties into print runs, serialization is kind of an embossed stamp that tells you where in the print sequence this card was out of how many. So, for instance, on Tony Gwynn, there's a game used memorabilia on the right-hand side. You can see that this card is number 135 of 199. That means that there are 199 of this card. This one is a blue parallel as well, something to keep in mind. And that there's only 199 of this exact same card, this blue Tony Gwynn game used memorabilia card with the bat in it, in existence. So where does additional value potentially come from these serialized cards? Well, certain print numbers have added value. For instance, the first card, number 1 of 199 is going to be the most valuable. It's the first one ever made of that card. But certain types of cards have additional value. Like if you have Independence Day, they make 76 of those cards. And if you have like number 17 of 76, I find that interesting. If I was a collector, that would be what I would aim for that type of card, because 1776 is the year of independence in the US. So it kind of is a cool little add up there. Another thing too is some people find getting the player's jersey number adds value. So for instance, I'm not sure what Tony Gwynn's jersey number is, but if it was 27, for instance, a lot of people have number 27, but if it was 27 of 199, that might have a little more value than just any other one except for number 1 or whatever. So just something to keep in mind when you're looking at your serialized cards is if they kind of have a unique flair to the serialization, the number sequence that you have, it might be worth a little bit more. And then another thing to keep in mind is 1 out of 1 are the rarest cards for a particular type, because there's only one of that card ever made. You saw that on the cut autograph that I had earlier. The difficulty with 1 of 1s is there's no reference for printing. So, or for pricing, sorry. There's no history of that card if you're the only one that's ever had it, right? So the price history is based on what you and a buyer would agree on. So that can be really difficult. There's a lot of pressure. Sometimes you can go to an appraiser who could say, oh, this would be worth this much, if you're willing to pay the money. But it's a tough one, because you might sell it and then 10 years down the line, oh, it's 100 times more valuable, right? So that's one of the difficult things with collecting is it's really tough to evaluate the price of a card that is a 1 of 1. So just something to keep in mind. If you pull one, hold on to it and, just kind of see how the player does. If anything, you don't want to sell it until you feel comfortable doing it, or keep it. If you just have a personal collection, that's a really cool card to have. It's the only one in existence. No one else has that card. So it's tough though. It's tough when you're trying to sell cards like that, because there's always a chance that you could have held on and sold it for more, right? So it's tricky. So next up is printing errors. I have a whole video that I did on this that goes over the different types of errors in a little more detail, but I'm just going to go over them kind of quickly. So printing errors occur during the manufacturing process or the packing process. So it's either during the design process as they come up with the look of the card, or as it's printing, there's an error, or when they're packing up the cards, something happens, like it crimps or something like that. And different types of errors have different impacts on the value of the card. Some aren't valuable at all. Some are really You know, they're ugly, they don't look good, no one would want that, but others make a card interesting. So for instance, on the right hand side, there's a player with no name on the front. So I mentioned Luis Robert have one of his short prints had no name on the front. That's an homage to this particular card. So sometimes a card, you know, any card that they were printing up until a certain point when they realized there was an error, might be a little more valuable than if it was just a random, you know, oh, they, you know, it's misaligned or something like that. So sometimes when it's unique in that way, where it's not ugly, people find it quite interesting. So the different types of errors you might encounter, you have things like miscut cards. So what they do is they'll print onto a single large piece of card stock, all the different cards, and then they'll cut those into each individual card. So sometimes what can happen is if something gets jostled and that whole sheet is misaligned, they'll actually cut down the middle. So then you have a card, at least in the case of miscut cards, if you can see the two different cards on it of the two different players or whatever, then it's miscut. Sometimes you have a missing front and back. What can happen is two layers or two sheets get stacked on top of each other by accident instead of just one, and it'll print on the front and it'll print on the back, but then nothing prints on the respective side for each one of each of those sheets. And so you'll have one sheet with the missing fronts and one sheet with a missing back. Sometimes those are valuable, but unfortunately what's happened is, not unfortunately necessarily, but Topps, for instance, has started selling cards that don't have the back, they're just the front. So they're kind of being manufactured from a retail perspective, so they're not really that special. Another thing is wrong backs. There is a notable one. I can't recall the players, but basically what happened is two players had their backs swapped out. So they kind of are they're kind of quirky because they're connected now forever, you know, in that they each have the other person's back on their card. So that's kind of fun. Missing foil is something where during the foil laying and process, when they put that onto the card, you know, it'll be missing the name, or they just like the layer doesn't adhere, and so it's just whatever was printed without anything foil. So that's an interesting one. Sometimes you get coloring errors, like in the printing process, maybe something leaks, there's a spill of ink or something that can cause some funkiness. Sometimes you get what are called albino cards, I think is what it is, and they're just all white. So something happens, the ink doesn't actually get laid, except for like kind of some of the black tones or whatever. And then there's design errors, which is kind of like the no name on front or other things like that, where they actually forget to put something or they put the wrong thing, which just can happen. You know, we all make mistakes. Something passes their quality assurance, they don't catch it until later. So sometimes that happens. But yeah, error cards, they're tough because when it comes to card collecting, it's based on what people want. So if people don't want error cards and they want pristine, perfect cards, which a lot of sports cards do, it can cause some issues. Like, for instance, you know, miscut cards. No one wants that. It's ugly. It doesn't look good. But you might have some stuff. This is more from a design perspective, but there was a player, and I mentioned this in my error video, who he picked up a random bat of someone's for the photo shoot, and on the bottom of it, there was curse words on it, and no one caught it in the whole process. So it actually went out with that like nickname for the bat, which, you know, had the F word in it. And so they had to correct it. So, you know, in some cases they put a black box over it, that kind of thing, in later prints. But people do look for that specific card because that was the original one. So it's a little different of an error. It's like it shouldn't have made it through, but it's not anything wrong with the card. It's just a unique design thing. So more often than not, design errors are more valuable than some of these other ones where they're printing errors. So just something to keep in mind. Next up, card grading. So if you're in it for investing, you are looking to sell your cards and keep the quality of them and, you know, determine the value of that. And in order to do that, you need to grade your cards. A raw card can go for a decent amount, but unless it's graded, it's very difficult to get the full value of the card, right? There's no guarantee on the quality. A collector who's a prospective buyer doesn't know how good of condition your card is, especially if you're selling on eBay and online and that kind of thing. So card grading is essential in order to help sellers and buyers verify the quality of a product to improve sales and ensure what you're buying. So card grading is a quality assessment of your cards of various things, corners, how sharp they are and how, nice and pointy they are. They're looking for alignment in the printing process. The more aligned it is to the center, like the centering of it, the higher the value. They're going to look for surface quality, so any scratches or anything like that. And then they're also going to look for, I'm trying to remember, I think those are the main three. I know that there's a fourth thing that I can't recall at this time, but they're going to look for any kind of imperfection. And the thing about this is there's multiple service providers for grading, which I'll talk about some of those later or in the next slide. But, you just have to kind of research and look for what provider might be the best for you. Right now, as I'm recording this, a lot of these grading companies have been bombarded by grading requests and submissions. So they've actually shut down accepting new submissions. So it can be tricky to get graded. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It can be pretty expensive too, depending on how many cards you're doing, because usually you pay per card. And then the other thing about card grading is it does retain the quality long term, because the graders will seal up in a graded card case that fully protects the card and ensures it retains the quality that they've graded it at. So I talked about the different companies that I was going to mention. So you have PSA, which is Professional Sports Authenticator. Not only do they do grading, but they'll authenticate things like signatures, autographs, that kind of stuff, and memorabilia. Next up is Beckett. They kind of do the same thing. They'll authenticate signatures and all that. They also have price guides and that kind of stuff, so they're a good one. And then you have SGC, or Sports Card Guarantee, and they do the same list of things. Each of them have different pricing, different bandwidth, different accessibility depending on where you are in the world. These are a lot of primary ones in America, but if you're based in Europe or something like that, there might be more accessible ones there, but a lot of these are global, so they might have locations in your country, so that's something to keep in mind. There's also less known companies. For instance, I'm in Canada, and there's a place that's recently started grading. That's, I think it's like KGC or KCG, and they're doing like, they're a Canadian authenticator. So the thing though is, when you're going with grading companies, you want to try to go for the more reputable ones, because people trust their grading. They know the process. They know the people back. There's a lot of they've built a brand and trust in their brand over time. So if you go for something that's cheaper and more accessible, you might sacrifice people's trust in the grading. So that's something to keep in mind. Next up is the costs of grading. So it's going to vary on company. Kind of the range that I've seen is $10 to $30 per card, but that does vary because there are submission minimums as well as bulk discounts. And that kind of thing. So for instance, there is the kind of the base ones, the value takes the longest, but it's more meant for lower end cards, things in the $30, $40 range, that kind of thing. And they have a 20 card minimum. So, but you pay $10 per card, but you'll see higher end ones where it's no card minimum, but it is more expensive per card, and they have, they show the maximums there. So for instance, if I wanted to get my Luis Robert short print graded, well, the maximum declared value is, above $500, but less than $1,000. So the regular would be the one I'd want to go with. It would cost me $50 to grade that single card. So just some of these things to think about is submission minimums. And, sometimes you get a little bit more of a discount, if they say 20 cards, or if they're like 100 cards to be submitted, but you'll actually spend $9 per card. There's things like that to consider. So, but I just wanted to give you guys a little preview on some of those costs associated with grading. There's also other services with different pricing as well. So next up is the actual grades themselves. So for PSA, they have 1 to 10, and they don't really have any half increments. They just go with whole. So you got, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, right? There's nothing in between each of those increments. The exception is they have a half increment for 1.5. So 1 is poor, 1.5 is fair, and then they move up from there in whole increments, 2, 3, 4, 5. Beckett does use half increments starting at 2. So it goes 1, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, etc. So that allows them to kind of, you know, if they're like, well, this could have been a 10, but there's that single thing here, but it's better than most 9s. So it allows them to kind of have that, so they can be like, okay, it's not quite pristine, but it's not quite, you know, mint. It's in between there. So you can get a higher a higher grading of it. And then there's SGC, which is 1 to 10, and they have half increments starting from 1. So, you know, it really depends what you want. You know, PSA is going to be a little more intense and harder to get, you know, to a 10. Beckett, though, you know, is kind of a nice middle ground where you're going to have some of those half increments and that kind of thing. So it really depends what you want. You got to do the research, and you got to make it worth it. You know, you got to make sure you're sending in the right cards, and you know what the costs are, and you know what your potential return is on them as well. The cool thing, though, is once they grade it, they will put it into like a case that is like pretty much sealed. Like you can pry and rip it open, but like basically once it's sealed, it is sealed for good. There's no like just quickly take it out. You have to break it basically to get into it. So that assures any buyers that nothing's been tampered with. It's tamper proof. The grade would be accurate and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, grading is definitely great if you want to retain the value or see the value of your cards based on the quality. How do you ensure the quality of your cards long term? Well, that would be through storage and protection. Things like sleeves, top loaders, cardboard boxes, shoe boxes, whatever. You know, something to put the cards into so they don't get damaged. The big thing, you know, is if you're like me and you open a lot, especially for the YouTube channel, you know, cardboard boxes are great because they just let me put sets and sets away. But, you know, sleeves, top loaders, these are all really important things to have because they'll help prevent damage. But also larger storage like cardboard boxes can make it easier to track down specific cards you're hunting for. So first up, let's talk about sleeves. Sleeves are one of the most common things you're going to use. Sometimes they're called penny sleeves, but they're there to help protect from surface scratches, but they don't protect from impact. So they're great to just kind of help protect, you know, some lower end cards that you're like, okay, this is kind of cool, but I wouldn't be worried if it got a little bit damaged. You know, you just kind of want to keep it looking good. That's where a sleeve can come in. The sleeve sizes do vary. So you're going to have, I think it's 35 points is the standard thickness for normal cards. If you've got like memorabilia or relic cards, you want to look for 130 point sleeves. I got myself some Beckett jumbo sleeves for my relics to help keep them protected. But, you know, you want to look at what size of card it is and then see what kind of sleeve you need, because it's going to be based on the card thickness. So just some stuff to consider when you're getting sleeves. I recently got a whole pack, that exact same pack that you see on the image. I got that because I go through so many cards, and it's nice to not have to hunt or scramble or remove sleeves from other cards and have to make that choice. Next up is top loaders. Some of you might also think of these as like plastic hard cases, but top loaders is the term that's used because they're loaded from the top. But they not only protect from surface damage, but they also protect from impact because it's a rigid plastic. It's not malleable and, you know, kind of soft plastic like sleeves are. But what I highly recommend is if you're putting something in a top loader, put it in a sleeve first, because the sleeve will protect it from the friction inside of the top loader. For instance, I had a relic card. I didn't have any sleeves for relics at the time. This is when I first kind of was starting. And when I put it into the top loader, it kind of peeled. There's like a top layer of like film on the card, and it kind of peeled a little bit in the corner. So that's going to impact the value. Fortunately, it wasn't a super high-end card. It, you know, was like a $10 card or $15 card. So it's not huge, but, you know, it's a lesson learned that I'm passing on to you. Sleeve it and then put it in a top loader. That's what you want to do to avoid the friction, but that'll also just protect it more and more from surface damage. Next up is storage boxes. These are a lifesaver for me. They help you store large quantities of cards. They can be pretty affordable. Amazon is pretty expensive, but my local card shop, Pastime Sports .ca, they've got a whole bunch of different varieties, and it's just great because I can just stop by or order and, you know, grab a few of these. The ones I tend to get are like the 1600 count, I think, and I'll label them based on set. You know, especially if I'm opening up a whole bunch of like 2020 series 2, I'll label it that way I know if I'm looking for a specific card from that set, okay, it's probably in here somewhere. So but you can also do it by rarity. Like I've got boxes for my rookies specifically, and I have also a box for my my rare cards. So that's going to be, you know, things that are serialized, different parallels, that kind of stuff, things that I want to easily get to if I ever wanted to sell or trade or what have you. So cardboard boxes, super great. Try and check out your local card shop or local hobby shop because they probably have them more affordable than, say, Amazon. But you're also helping support, you know, local, which is always good in this business. So to finish things off, I want to talk about some of the risks and mistakes when it comes to card collecting. You know, because especially if you're approaching it from an investment point of view, there's a lot of risks involved there, and you know there's some mistakes that you can avoid by being prepared before you jump into things, right? You know, you got to do your research. So first off, the risks. What are some of the risks that, you know, you have to take into consideration? It's an expensive hobby. You know, if you're doing what I'm doing and you're opening up a lot of boxes, obviously I'm doing it for content, but you know, if you're opening up a lot of packs on the regular, it adds up. You know, you can easily spend quite a bit in a short period of time. So I definitely recommend being cognizant of your budget, how much you're spending on cards. If you're looking for a very specific card, as opposed to, I'll get what I get, it's better to go for singles than it is to open up a pack, right? Because with a single, yeah, sure, you might be spending $100 more than a hobby box, but you're guaranteed to get the card you want, as opposed to you have no idea. So that's one thing to consider, you know, is what you're spending and what you're trying to get out of things. The other thing is try not to assume that, you know, valuable cards are guaranteed money, right? You know, I think about the age of the Beanie Babies. People were getting these Beanie Babies, they were holding on to them, thinking, oh, these are going to be worth so much in the future because they're so rare. But like these people are holding on to them, they're not selling, right? You know, holding is great, but at the same time, like, you can't consider yourself in the black, you know, to be profitable until you sell a card. Otherwise, you're still in the hole for, you know, what you've spent on those packs or on the cards. So that's the big thing, is don't assume your card is going to sell and don't consider it already sold. You know, don't consider yourself profitable until you've sold at a profit. It's the biggest thing, right? You know, you're counting your chickens before they hatch. This is exactly where that phrase is for. And then consider most box openings an expense. Just because, sure, yeah, you could pull a card like I did that's potentially worth $600, but there's no guarantee I'll get that, right? Because, and this is the next note, is prices fluctuate a lot. So when you open up that box and you get that fancy card, sure, yeah, you can be like, cool, great, I'm up like $100 or $200 or whatever. But if that player gets injured, for instance, Luis Robert recently got an injury that's putting him out for about 2 months, he might come back and not play as well as he did. And this early on in his career, it could really impact the value of those cards because he might not play as well as he did before injury. The same thing applies to scandals. You know, if a person's doping, using foreign substances, if a person gets, you know, in any kind of trouble, they get arrested, things like that. Sometimes that can increase the value, but more often than not, that can decrease it because the player is not going to obtain more value and become a better player, right? You want someone to become a Hall of Famer. You don't want them to be mediocre. So prices can fluctuate a lot. So it's one of those things that you could sell sooner if you think like, I don't know, this guy's good, but he might fizzle out later. But then you might have a Mike Trout situation where they become one of the best players in the game. So just something to consider when you're doing this hobby, is you're never guaranteed the price that it starts off at. So some mistakes that people often make, maybe mistakes I've made, that I want to go through and just kind of warn you guys about as you're entering the hobby, are some of the following. So don't try to collect everything. You know, there's a lot of cards out there, and if you try to collect everything, it's going to be hard. It's going to be overwhelming. It's going to seem like too much. So try to find a set and stick to that, right? You know, if you like Topps Heritage, go with that. Open up Topps Heritage and try and complete that set. If you like the base Topps, go with that. If you like Diamond Kings, go with that, right? Whatever you like, go with it. But try to narrow down your focus, because it'll make it easier, because then you can research that and understand that set more before moving on. So for me, I stuck with the base sets for quite a while until I did, you know, I really knew my stuff, or comparative to, or relative to when I started. And then do your research as you kind of start to master, quote unquote, that set. Move on to another one and be like, okay, let's learn about this one. What am I looking for? Should I know about it? Because they do vary. Topps Heritage is very different than the base Topps. So just something to think about. The next thing is be careful about getting too much retail product, because retail product doesn't have as good of odds as you would with hobby boxes. Hobby boxes are specifically sent to hobby stores and card stores. You're not going to find a hobby box at Walmart or Target if they were to, you know, start selling cards again. But yeah, you just have better odds with hobby stuff. You're paying a little more, but there's less of them made, so there's a better chance to get that hobby exclusive stuff. Retail tends to just be flooded with a lot of the base stuff. Next thing is, don't jump right into collecting. Do your research. Figure out what set you want to do. Figure out what kind of cards you're hunting for. Look at your different shops around. See what prices are good. See, you know, is a new set about to come out? Should you hold off? You know, get a feel for where the hobby is right now when you're watching this and starting. You know, watching this video, you're already ahead of the game. You're trying to learn what to do and what to know. But you know, it's important to go into this, especially if you're going in an investment kind of perspective, to really know what you're investing in. You know, you wouldn't invest in like property if you didn't know that stuff. So why would you do that with cards? So do your research, talk to people. It helps. Don't store cards in unsafe locations. You know, for instance, storing in your basement that's prone to leaks or flooding, probably not a good idea unless you have a waterproof, or a water completely tight sealed location to put that stuff in. You know, try to store it in a safe location, in boxes, so that, you know, they're not going to get damaged. Next, and I kind of touched on this, is don't assume you'll make money. You know, you are more likely to potentially lose money unless you're really, really smart with what you're doing and you're flipping. And, you know, if you tackle it very specifically in an investment point of view, might be a little easier to make money. But if you're collecting like I am, you know, the end goal for me isn't making money. You know, maybe I'll make some money back, you know, as I get some decent cards, but you know, it's a hobby, it's an expense. You know, that's the way to look at it. Look at it as an expense. Don't be looking at it as, you know, am I coming out profitable? Just, if you enjoy the hobby, know your budget, and, you know, as our lotto here in Canada or BC says, is know your limit, play within it, you know? So if you know you can't be spending $1,000 a month on cards, don't. Keep it simple. Go small, right? Maybe find some friends that you can go and you can break a box together with and be like, hey, you get all these cards, I'll get all these cards, or you'll get this player if we get them, stuff like that. You know, you see breaks online, but maybe you can do that more with your friends, and that can help reduce the upfront cost for you. Just a thought. Next up is don't trust trades online unless you know the people really well or they have a really, really good reputation. You know, it's just very easy to get screwed over, especially now. There's a lot of scalpers, there's a lot of predatory people that are seeing this hobby and seeing the money that can be made, and they're kind of ruining that part of it. So either find a service online that, you know, can guarantee that you'll be okay, that they can act as a trade mediator or something like that, or just only do stuff in person. You know, trade locally, you know, when, you know, things open up more. For those of you watching outside of 2021, 2020, COVID was a thing. When things open up, there'll be, the ability to trade. The other option is you can even talk to local card shops and be like, hey, I have this card. I really would want that card. Would that be something you consider doing a trade on, or maybe what kind of value? Local card shops are great, and they might even be able to help, help with a trade, because they might know people and be like, oh, I know someone who is actually looking for that, and they might be able to help set things up. So it really depends on you, though. You can take the risk online, but be very careful, because there's a lot of predatory people that will try and screw you over. So just a word of caution. Next thing, just a couple tips. These are just some stuff that I've learned. First off, you've got Beckett, you've got Cardboard Connection, and there's a whole bunch of other sites that have great resources, not just on pricing, but just information about each set that comes out, different things going on in the hobby. If you regularly frequent those websites, it's going to be super helpful for you in getting informed and knowing the hobby a lot better. Beckett is definitely my go-to. I have their online price guide subscription for baseball cards, and it's been absolutely wonderful for my channel and everything. But hopefully it's something that you appreciate as well. So definitely go check those out. The other thing is make friends in the community or online. There's some great places to interact with people. There might be local Facebook groups for card trading and sports cards and that kind of thing. There might be forums that you find online, including Reddit, one of the largest forums out there. And the subreddit that I really like is r/baseball cards. A lot of great people there, really awesome. You can share your mail days, things that you pulled from packs, and people are really supportive. Some people can sell on there and trade. If that's your jam, like I said, be cautious of trading, though. Selling is a lot different because you can sell it through a storefront thing like eBay or whatever. And the other tip that I highly recommend is get to know your local card shop folks well. These people are in the business of the hobby, and, it can be really tough. So, supporting your local card shop is great. Like I said, my local card shop that I go to is pastimesports.ca. They have great availability. They have like 3 or 4 locations in kind of my area, kind of spread out. But the people at the one that I go to, absolutely wonderful. Shout out to them if they're watching this. But, if you have something like that in your area, definitely patronize them, because they are, it's hard. There's not a lot of margin in cards sometimes, and everything that they sell is great. And when you get to know them, they'll be more willing to let you know when certain things are coming out, and help you out, and give you advice and things like that. The people that I go to, they've been absolutely wonderful. I talk to them a lot about sports too, and that kind of thing, like baseball and how the Blue Jays are doing. So, and I know, one of the guys offered that once I, dip my toes more into hockey cards, that he'll be glad to give me kind of the rundown on what I need to know. So, that's kind of the thing. It can be really beneficial to get to know these people, but it's also just great because, for me, I know a lot of the people that I know personally aren't card collectors or sports card collectors. So it's nice to have people that share the hobby. So that I would say is one of my top tips, is just get to know your local card shop people, because they're wonderful. And that's it. That is the video. I know it was a lot, but it's a big hobby. There's a lot of things to know. I really appreciate you guys watching this, and I hope it was informative. If you have any, suggestions or, additional tips that you want to give people, I know I'm not a master, but, I definitely think having, started recently in collecting and learning quickly, there's a lot of things that I, would have been helpful to know right out the gate, or just something kind of a nice, quick, easy repository of a lot of helpful information. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys watching. Feel free to give this a thumbs up, all the usual YouTube stuff, and feel free to subscribe. It really helps my channel. We are aiming to hit 1,000 subs. Right now, we're only about 160 something as the time of recording this, but I would really love to see us hit 1,000 subs. If we hit 1,000 subs, I will definitely do a giveaway of something. Maybe we could even do a box. Maybe we could do that. So if you guys subscribe, you'll have a chance to be in that, and we'll have more details when we hit 1,000. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hope this was helpful, and we will see you guys in the next video. Bye.